Hello everyone and welcome back to Miss Key's classroom. My name is Rachel and in today's video I am going to be talking about parent-teacher interviews. I know that parent-teacher interviews can be incredibly daunting even if you've been doing them for a long time, but especially if you are in your first few years of teaching. And so in today's video I'll share my tips and my advice so that your parent-teacher interviews can run really smoothly and that you can maintain and build those really positive relationships with the parents and caregivers of the students in your class. I hope you enjoy this video and that some of the advice I provide is helpful to you, but for now, let's get straight into it. So let's start off with some advice for the things that I'd suggest you get ready before the interviews start so that they can run really smoothly. The first thing that I'd suggest you prepare or that you get ready before the interview is your grades book. So whether you have an actual physical book or maybe it's all online or on your laptop or something, just make sure that you'll be able to access it easily during the interview in case a parent asks you, how is my child going in English so far, or how are they going in science so far? What about this assignment? You can easily check your grade book because you've got it ready. You don't have to rifle through any papers or waste time trying to find the grades for that particular assignment because they're all there ready to go. So yeah, definitely have your grades book somewhere so that you can access it during the interview in case a parent happens to ask about specific grades for a subject. So the next thing that I suggest you have ready to go prior to the interview is a running sheet with all the interview times on it. So on that running sheet, I'd have the time of the interview, the parents' names and the student's name as well, just so that I know who the parents are that are coming in and I know what time they're meant to be coming in as well. Then as I do each interview, I tick off the names just to know who actually came to the interviews. Maybe a couple of parents might have missed the interview. And so it just helps you to keep track of who's coming in, who you're talking to throughout the afternoon, because often we'll have interviews back to back and it can be really hard to keep track of who's meant to be having an interview when if you don't have that running sheet. So on that running sheet as well, I have it printed off and I put it on the table next to me, and then I'll also jot down maybe any concerns that I wanted to raise with the parent, or any feedback that I wanted to give them, both positive and negative. I'll just jot that down next to the student's name so that during the interview I'm sort of prompted to talk about that. If I do have a little bit of time at the end, I can look at my sheet and I can remember that I wanted to raise this with the parent. So maybe I might write down something like struggles to meet due dates or something like that, so that if the parent asks me, do you have any concerns? I can look at my running sheet and say, yeah, I do. My main concern is that your child is struggling to meet due dates. I'll also jot down any positive things as well. So maybe it's that the student gave a really amazing presentation to the class last week or something. So just having those little notes written down before the interview can help you to remember things that you wanted to discuss, because when we're under pressure, we're really nervous, we're running around trying to have all these interviews, we can forget the things that we actually wanted to talk about. And so I find having that running sheet with the list of things, the students' names and any points that I wanted to discuss just helps me to stay on track and keeps that conversation flowing throughout the interview. And then the last thing that I have printed out or that I make sure I have easy access to are the term planners for each subject or the unit plans for each subject, so that if I am asked by a parent or caregiver what's coming up in English next term, I can easily refer to it and say, okay, at the start of the term we're doing a novel and then we're going to do poetry. When you are under the pump and you're under pressure and maybe you're a little bit nervous during the interviews, it's really easy to forget stuff. And so you've planned out your term, you know what you're doing, but when you're put on the spot like that, it's really easy to forget. And so I always have my term planners or my unit plans ready, so that if a parent asks, I can show them if they want to see them, or I can just refer to them and make sure that I am communicating the correct information to the parents. So that's sort of the end of my tips for what to get ready before the interviews. Hopefully they made sense. But now let's move on to some advice for during the interviews. So whenever I have a parent-teacher interview, the first thing I always start with is I ask the parent or caregiver if there is anything that they would like to discuss, any questions that they have or any concerns that they wanted to raise. It's a really good way to start conversation because often parents will have things that they want to talk about. And so if you ask them straight away, you know, what concerns do you have? They can immediately start talking and get that conversation flowing. Because I think what a lot of people worry about isn't necessarily that like there's going to be conflict with a parent or anything like that during an interview. It might just be that there's not a lot to say. And so if you start that conversation by asking them if there's anything they wanted to talk about, it is a really good way to prompt that conversation, and then maybe something that they say will lead on to something else that you wanted to mention. And so yeah, I find that asking those questions just straight off the bat is a really good way to get the conversation started with the parent or caregiver and just kick off the interview, because it means that at the end of the interview the parent can walk away feeling like they got to talk about the things that they wanted to talk about and maybe ask any questions or raise any concerns that they had. So once the parent has had a chance to raise any concerns or ask any questions that they might have had, it's time for you to look over to your running sheet, look at the notes that you jotted down earlier and raise anything that you needed to with the parent, both positives and negative things. I think with all students, it's never going to be just negative. We always know that there are things that students do really, really well and maybe things that they need to work on. I believe that for every single student. And so I think it's really, really important that if you are going to talk about any concerns that you have, that you also talk about positive things as well, that the student is doing really well, because it just reassures the parent a little bit that you do notice the amazing things they're doing as well, and that you really want to support them in the areas that they're maybe struggling in. So if we go back to the example I used before about missing due dates, if I was to raise that with a parent, I would say something like, your student is struggling to meet the due dates with assignments, and then I would go on to say something positive like, however, the work that they're submitting is of a really high quality, and it's great to see that work, and so clearly we need to just do a little bit of work around the time management skills of doing that work so that it can be submitted on time. And so if we have that balance of things that students are struggling with, but then the things that they're doing really well, it shows that you can see both of those things in students and that you want to support them to do even better in the things that they're already doing great in, and then also support them to maybe overcome the things that they're being challenged by or something like that. I guess if you are really worried about the way a parent might receive some of the comments that you need to make, so maybe there's quite a serious concern that you have that you want to raise with the parent, I would suggest having a chat to maybe a mentor teacher before, or your faculty leader or your year level leader. Have a chat to them before the interview. Maybe raise your concerns with them first. They might be able to provide you with some advice about how to approach it with the parent. They might even be able to sit in on that particular interview with you, and that might just help you feel a little bit more at ease about raising maybe some of the more challenging concerns with parents or caregivers. And I guess always remember that at the end of the day, you as the teacher and the parent or caregiver, you want the same thing. You want the best for that student. They want the best for their child. And so I think if you do have any concerns, it is really important to raise them, because you want to support that child. And if you just ignore the things because you're a little bit worried about talking about them, it's not going to help the student in the long run. So like I said, definitely seek help if you are really nervous about a particular interview or a particular subject. But yeah, always remember that at the end of the day, everyone just wants the best for that student and wants to support them so that they can flourish. So yeah, keep that in the back of your mind if you are feeling a little bit nervous about parent-teacher interviews. So my next piece of advice is to do with timing. Often during parent-teacher interviews, we will have a block of time set out during the day. So maybe it's an afternoon, or maybe the interviews go all day. It depends on your school. But no matter what, we generally have interviews back to back back. It's like go, go, go the whole time that we have interviews. And so it can be really exhausting, and it can also be a bit of an issue if you have interviews that start running overtime, because you're talking to this parent and you can see the next person waiting, and you want to keep moving because you don't want each interview after that one to be running behind time, if that makes sense. So what I like to do is at my school, we always have like a big clock up on the wall that sort of prompts us when it's time to start wrapping up. But generally, maybe about 5 minutes or 3 minutes before the interview's due to end, that's when I sort of start wrapping up. I ask for any final questions or anything else that they wanted to raise, and then I start wrapping up the interview so that we can finish on time. The parent feels like they've talked about everything that they wanted to talk about, and then I can move on to my next interview. If you feel like there is still more to discuss, or maybe you've started wrapping up and said, is there anything else you wanted to talk about? And then it's prompted a whole new conversation. Make sure you say something like, okay, that's definitely something that we can discuss. However, I do have another parent waiting at the moment. So how about I give you a call later in the week to discuss that? Or maybe ask the parent to email you instead, because it shows that you value what the parent has to say and that you do really want to follow up on it, but that you just have to do it at another time because you've got other parents waiting. I hope that's making sense as well. So yeah, definitely start wrapping up a few minutes before the interview is due to end so that you do have time to have those final comments, have that final chat, and then move on to the next interview. So then I always finish off the interview by thanking the parent for their time. This one might seem a little bit obvious, but I think it's really important to point out because parents are incredibly busy people and they spend the majority of their time running around after their children. And so they've probably taken time out of their day or maybe taken time off of work to come and have an interview with you. And so I think it's really important to thank them for their time and acknowledge that they've taken time out of their day as well to have this interview with you. So it's a way of maintaining that really positive relationship with parents and caregivers, which is a really, really important part of schooling. And so yeah, I always end by thanking the parent for their time. So I think that is all the advice I have to offer for now. If you have parent-teacher interviews coming up, I wish you the absolute best of luck. You're going to be amazing at it. If you have any other questions though, please drop them in the comments below. I'd be more than happy to have a chat. But for now, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you all very, very soon in my next video. Bye!